If you'd like a real-time tutorial of this aurora painting with gouache, head to the link that's in the description below. We recently took a trip to the West Coast and were blessed with the most amazing display of aurora in the sky. And it was my first time seeing it in person. So, of course, I had to paint it. But I have never painted an aurora with gouache, and I've actually never done a night scene either, so this was brand new territory for me. So today I want to share how I approach a new subject, the things I go through, and how I continue to push myself to learn and improve, and all of the lessons learned in between. This is definitely a bit more of a vulnerable video for me because I don't like necessarily sharing tutorials about things I'm not confident in, but I think this is still really valuable, and I hope you learn something too. Before I jump into my painting, I like to give myself at least 1 or 2 full sketchbook pages to just play. And when I say play, I mean anything goes. I'm playing with different color mixes, I'm playing with different layering techniques, I'm just letting things flow, and whatever comes to mind is down on the page. Now, like I said, I'm not very familiar with painting night scenes, but something I wanted to focus on was not using too much like stereotypical night colors, as in dark blue, dark purple, black. I wanted to challenge myself to paint with a little more of a muted palette, more grays, and see if I could create something that was a believable night scene without just pure blue. Of course, it's hard to break habits, and in the end, I ended up using way more blue than I had originally planned for. I think this is a lesson learned in itself. Sometimes as we're painting, we let our habits come through, even if we're actively working against them. But it's not necessarily a bad thing, it's just something that takes a lot of time and repetition and awareness. And of course, now that I've done this exercise a few times, I can really easily see when I'm using too much blue. I don't think using a lot of blue in a night scene is a bad thing, it's just that I was trying to play with different colors, different mixes, trying to push beyond what I already know and what I was kind of familiar with in a night scene. Here's a look at my page of just playing. I tried to make little color notes, but kind of lost track of that halfway through. And of course, as I said, I still felt I used too much blue. When I did the little practice painting at the bottom there, I realized it was really hard to get very soft washes in the sky without using a lot of water. So I decided in my final attempt, I would use much more water and let things flow more in the sky. In the little thumbnails on the top, I was also practicing different methods for laying in the aurora. So on the top left, I felt that was pretty successful just because it had a bit more wispiness to it. The aurora lines weren't so prominent. In terms of color, I did feel the top 2 were more successful, especially the top left because I added a bit of turquoise to the water reflection in the foreground, and I used a bit of red to contrast all the bluish green in the painting. And overall, I really liked the look of the dry brush texture in the foreground. Phase 2 never really ends. Discovery happens every single time you pick up the brush and paint something. We use our past knowledge to inform our choices with each mixture and each brushstroke. The more we paint, the more boxes of knowledge we can pull from. In my case, the aurora box is practically empty, but I can still make informed decisions based on past experience. For instance, I know that the pigment particles in gouache are slightly bigger than in watercolor, and many of the colors don't actively spread as much when dropped in water. Therefore, I know if I get my paper wet and drop a color into the water, it will move around a little more slowly and sit heavier on the paper. And in this scene, since I want to build up some intense dark colors, I'll be using a lot more pigment. As we all know, water control is extremely important in gouache, so whenever I enter the realm of using really wet washes, it gets a little crazy. It's a little chaotic. So when I did my sky, I started with a really dark bluish blackish color, and I dropped some bright green into it and I let it flow. I tilted my paper up, letting it bleed down into that dark sky. But because of the heavier pigment load, gouache can dry really unpredictably. And this is where I think the repetition will come in. If I sit down and do this painting 50 times, eventually I will get it right. I'll find just the right amount of water, just the right amount of dark colors versus light colors. I'll figure out the right timing and let everything flow and create that nice soft aurora. But of course, since I'm at the beginning of the learning phase, my aurora is not going to be perfect. But it's okay, we're in the discovery phase. And like I said, this phase lasts a long time and maybe never really ends. Not only am I playing with color and figuring out the water and what I need to do to make that nice soft aurora effect, I'm also playing with shapes and textures. And of course with gouache we have the benefit of doing dry brush texture, and it just is so glorious to layer up those dry brush colors. But like I said, it can dry unpredictably, and especially when you're using a lot of water, you can get some really strange edges. In the sky here, you can see all these little kind of dark splotchy areas. That's what happens when the paint dries heavier along the edges of the water, the blooms that you create. So if you're doing a very diluted area with a lot of pigment, this is potentially something you can run into. In the end, I'm able to remove these kind of blemishes in Photoshop and color correct everything so that it matches what I see in person. And this is what we're left with. Definitely a very stylized version, but you know what? It really captures the magic I felt on that day. As I mentioned, I have a full real-time tutorial with explanation in the link in the description below. This tutorial is taking all the lessons I learned in the previous attempts and giving it another go. And this is the final result from the tutorial. I hope this video encourages you to keep going even if you're struggling. Whenever you're attempting a new subject, it's very difficult to get over that initial learning curve, but it will get easier. I know from experience. Thanks for watching, everyone. I'll see you again soon. Take care.